Hello guys, welcome back to Anime Moments. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Against the Gods based on novel. So let's start explanation. Navy Tide Nation, 0 wins, 6th place of the 6 nations. Divine Incense Nation, 1 win, 5th place of the 6 nations. Grand Azura Nation, 2 wins, 4th place of the 6 nations. Sunflower Dew Nation, 3 wins, 3rd place of the 6 nations. Black Fiend Nation, 4 wins, 2nd place of the 6 nations. Blue Wind Nation, 5 wins, 1st place of the 6 nations. Following Feng Fei Yan's announcement, the arena became a field of commotion. The 6 nations' performances were extraordinarily harmonious and did not need tiebreakers. As for the ranking results, absolutely no one was able to predict them before the start of the matches. Navy Tide Nation, top-ranked nation of the last ranking tournament that brimmed with confidence, had brought out a genius in this ranking tournament, yet he had been swept away Yunche. Their morale collapsed as they were utterly beaten. Blue Wind, which had always been there for a mere formality and a source of laughter, was now overwhelming dominant. With merely a one-man army, it had flattened the 5 nations, shocking the entire audience. Those few Blue Wind practitioners had long become emotionally moved. Blue Wind Nation had always been treated as a laughingstock and had only been able to gain a name of humiliation for itself in the 7-nation ranking tournament. But now, it had firmly stepped on top of the heads of all 5 nations. They had finally been able to thoroughly let off steam and stand proud. This was unprecedented in all of history, something they didn't even dare dream of thinking about in the past. And the one who brought them this tremendous glory was Yunche. What the Blue Wind practitioners wanted now was for the ranking tournament to quickly end. They would dash to those huge merchant guilds, and even if they had to spend all the money on them, they had to immediately purchase 100,000 sound transmission talismans and quickly transmit this great news of endless glory back to Blue Wind Nation. Yet there was not the slightest of happiness on Yunche's face. Since entering the arena up until now, his expression was always a field of calm, because in his heart, he was very clear that his previous matches were merely done to accomplish Kang Wanha's dream. It was only for winning glory for Blue Wind, and nothing more. But this was not actually the true purpose that he had come to participate in the ranking tournament for. To him, the real vicious battle was about to start only now. The 6-nation rankings have already been determined. Yunche, do you wish to proceed on and battle my Divine Phoenix Empire? After announcing the 6-nation rankings, Feng Fei Yan's gaze turned toward Yunche as he asked solemnly. Following the fall of his voice, an extremely low voice was sound transmitted at Yunche, but I suggest that you'd best save a bit of effort. At this time, only Yunche and Divine Phoenix Empire's 10 top-notch disciples remained in the preparation area. The gaze of the entire audience fell upon Yunche's body, waiting for his response. Whether or not he picked to challenge Divine Phoenix, the name, Yunche, would spread throughout the profound Sky 7 nations within one night, becoming a name that would surge through all of the profound Sky practitioning world. Him not choosing to challenge them was alright, and him being crushingly defeated when challenging was also alright. None of that would be of any effect, because that was Divine Phoenix Empire, Divine Phoenix Sect. Before Feng Fei Yan's voice fell, Yunche had already leapt up high, landing on the Phoenix stage as Dragon Fault immediately appeared within his hands. The enormous heavy sword's pressure rolled up a screaming wind vortex, roughly splitting apart the surrounding atmosphere. He stood on the stage, raised his head, and said, "Of course I'll fight. I didn't come here today to aim for a measly 2nd place. Instead, I came here to stomp your Divine Phoenix Sect down." Once Yunche's extremely arrogant words came out, the entire audience instantly quieted. Then, he was drowned in sounds of ridicule coming from everywhere. F***CK. This guy's actually this arrogant. Judging by his words, could it be that he's absurdly thinking of defeating Divine Phoenix Sect? What arrogance! It's just simply ignorant to the point of being ridiculous. Who do you think you are? Wanting to become number 1, dream on. Just because you defeated the 5 nations by yourself, you think you're qualified to challenge Divine Phoenix Sect? And to even stomp Divine Phoenix Sect down? That's just the biggest joke I've heard in my entire life. You had already been impressive enough, why the F***ck are you rampant in front of Divine Phoenix Sect? I'm even blushing for him in embarrassment. Just due to this one line from Yunche, everyone's astonished lament toward him changed into taunts and sneers that filled the stadium. Especially Divine Phoenix Empire's profound practitioners, they were a stretch of wild laughter and sneers, as though they heard the funniest of ignorant jokes. Profound practitioners from the 5 nations that had been swept by Yunche were originally holding back their bellyful of grievances, but now it was as if they had found something to vent through. They taunted him without restraint as though jeering at a toad that wanted to eat swan meat. Ha ha, a Phoenix disciple in the preparation area coldly laughed. I initially thought that this kid wasn't that simple, but it looks like he's only an idiot who overestimates his abilities. Very normal, after impressively sweeping through the 5 nations, the unprecedented inflation of his ego is understandable. Another Phoenix disciple shrugged. But he obviously found the wrong opponent. It seems like took us to be the same as those 5-nation group of rookies that aren't even worth looking at. He is, after all, from Blue Wind. I suppose that's just how large of a scope he has. The Phoenix disciple that spoke drew back the corners of his mouth as he shook his little finger. On the Divine Phoenix Empire's seating area, the various princes, elders, and palace masters all laughed in disdain. However, Feng Hongkong's brow sunk as his gaze became sharp and overcast. At this moment, he realized that he was mistaken about something. He originally had the same thoughts as Feng Shiming and the rest, thinking that Yunche had taken the initiative to come to the ranking tournament to challenge Divine Phoenix Sect because he knew that he could not hide. After all, he, with the Phoenix bloodline, only had 2 fated choices to make. One was to swear loyalty to Divine Phoenix Sect and become a Divine Phoenix Sect member forever, so to preserve his life. The other was to die. Him taking the initiative to come could mean that he had selected the former. If he allowed Divine Phoenix Sect to find him, then it obviously meant that he chose the latter. Feng Hongkong had always thought that him coming to the ranking tournament while displaying his might without restraint was him deliberately exhibiting himself to Divine Phoenix Sect, proving to them that he was not trash, that he had the qualifications to enter Divine Phoenix Sect. But now, once those words of his came out, it was obvious that he was provoking Divine Phoenix Sect. And those purposefully brief sweeps on his opponents in each and every match. If thought like that, then he wasn't even showing off, and instead, was giving Divine Phoenix Sect a demonstration. What exactly does he want to do? Could it be that he truly thinks that he had the qualifications and ability to go head-on against Divine Phoenix Sect? Then you mean you wish to represent Blue Wind Nation and defeat Divine Phoenix Empire to seize first place in this session's ranking tournament? Feng Fei Yan laughed faintly. Even though he laughed, there was not the least bit of emotion. His thoughts right now were about identical with Feng Hongkong's. The reason why he came here was not to reach a compromise with Divine Phoenix Sect with his surrender. Instead, he clearly wanted to use force. Feng Fei Yan sneered inwardly. Yunche having such strength at only 19 years of age was comparable to the upper echelons of his peers in Divine Phoenix Sect. As for his level-skipping abilities, they were nearly unimaginable. With his show of talent today, if he was willing to permanently become a member of Divine Phoenix Sect, he, as an elder, would be the first to approve. Even if he had offended 13th Prince in the past, that could also become a bygone. He believed that Feng Hongkong and the other elders were also of the same opinion. After all, no sects would want a wastrel, and no sect would reject an astonishingly gifted young disciple. He previously thought that Yunche had opened a way out, so much that he might even acquire a position that wasn't low in Divine Phoenix Sect, but he just so wanted to pick a death route. Daring to proclaim that you would stomp our Divine Phoenix Empire down in the 7-nation ranking tournament, you are the first one since forever. Feng Fei Yan put on a fake smile. Even I suddenly admire your boldness somewhat. What he said was boldness, not courage or guts. Naturally, the element of ridicule was comparatively more. However, this first place won't be realized with words, and won't be realized with delusions either. Rather, it'll depend on whether or not you have such qualifications and strength. Feng Fei Yan's voice became heavier by some, as his gaze turned toward the 10 participating profound practitioners of Divine Phoenix Sect. My Phoenix disciples, did you understand that? Blue Wind Nation's profound practitioner has already issued challenges to you, and also proclaimed that he will take the first place in this ranking tournament. Which one of you will go forth? What he said was, which one, not to fight as a team. Yunche was alone. Even though for all 10 of Divine Phoenix Sect's people to be dispatched wouldn't be violating the rules at all, it would undoubtedly draw the mockery of others. And with their Divine Phoenix Sect's dignity, they definitely felt that it was beneath them to do so. Therefore, what Feng Fei Yan meant was to clearly just dispatch one person, yet the other meaning was clearly, any random one, would easily beat Yunche. Just as Feng Fei Yan's voice fell, a person amongst the Phoenix disciples walked out with slow steps. He said with a mild yet insipid tone as he walked, "It is nearly 5 in the afternoon now. Just 2 more hours, and the skies will darken. But tomorrow's matter of exploring primordial profound arc is more important than even the heavens, and requires sufficient time to make prior preparations. So this match ought best to be finished quickly." As he spoke, the man had already gently floated up. His phoenix clothing fluttered as it brought up numerous dazzling streams of golden light, then landed on top of the phoenix stage as though a light feather. He looked at Yunche with a smile on his face. "So this match, let this prince do it." "Ah, it's 14th prince." A wave of shocked cries came from the spectator seating area. This outcome was entirely out of their expectations. 14th prince would actually personally act to deal with Yunche. Isn't this thinking too highly of him? Did you hear what 14th prince said? He's doing it in order to save time, and finish the battle quickly. After all, tomorrow is the day to enter the primordial profound arc. The one who leapt onto the Phoenix stage and stood before Yunche was shockingly the 14th Prince of Divine Phoenix Empire. The one who possessed terrifying aptitude, whose profound strength was as great as Emperor Profound Realm Rank 8, Feng Shiluo. Facing Yunche, he faintly smiled, without any posture of anxiousness before a battle. Feng Hongkong secretly nodded. Using Feng Shiluo to battle Yunche was also the outcome he most wanted to see. Even though Yunche had swept through everything before and the combat power he exhibited was around the 4th level of the Emperor Profound Realm, any of the 10 Phoenix disciples could still crush him. However, no one could guarantee that this would be all of Yunche's strength. If he had hidden it to some extent and also possessed extremely powerful trump cards, then the Phoenix disciples who battled with him would have the possibility of not winning, and even losing. Even though this possibility was next to nil, even it was only a 1 out of a billionth chance, they still absolutely could not be rash. Because the Divine Phoenix Sect, who had been the mightiest in Profound Sky for an entire 5,000 years, could not afford to lose. They absolutely must not lose, either. But if it was Feng Shiluo who came on stage, then there would definitely be no possibility of losing. At the same time, the lines Feng Shiluo spoke when coming onto the stage were also incredibly ingenious. They didn't expose the high regard they held Yunche at in the slightest, but rather was a type of condescension. Because the reason for him to personally exchange moves with Yunche was to save time. Which was clearly saying that he could easily defeat Yunche with the effort of lifting a palm. Feng Fei Yan nodded. "That's fine too. Seems like watching an entire days of matches also made 14th Prince's hands somewhat itchy. Then, Divine Phoenix Empire will let 14th Prince Feng Shiluo have a battle with Yunche. Even though our Divine Phoenix Empire has 10 participating people, we still disdain to oppress someone through an unfair numbers advantage. 39th session of Profound Sky Ranking Tournament, the battle that decides first and second place, now begins." With a wave of his palm, Feng Fei Yan cleanly and succinctly issued out the order to start the match. Whoosh! Feng Shiluo raised his arms, as a ball of scorching hot flames burned up in the center of his palm. Looking at Yunche, he said with an insipid smile, "Yunche, even though I don't know where you got your confidence from, you will right away find out how laughable this confidence of yours is. You and the ones who were defeated by you are beings of 2 different levels, while I and you, also the same. But before this, I will give you a chance to let you properly experience my Divine Phoenix Sect's unparalleled Phoenix Flames." "Experience Phoenix Flames?" Yunche replied with the same dull smile, "That won't be necessary. Phoenix Flames, huh? I can't say who will experience whose yet. Yunche extended his palms, and a ball of scarlet-colored phoenix flames burned up extremely quickly. The height that the flames soared had even far surpassed the phoenix flames in Feng Shaluo's hand. Clamor! The moment the phoenix flames in Yunche's hand were revealed, the entire arena instantly blew up. The expressions of the phoenix disciples all changed simultaneously. Feng Hangkong as well as Feng Feiyan and the others all knitted their brows greatly. Hua Minghai and Ling Jie nearly fell down beneath their seats from being startled. The two both knew very well that Yunche possessed the Phoenix bloodline. When he directly voiced his provocation at Divine Phoenix Empire, these two were already frightened quite a bit. But now, under the condition that Divine Phoenix Sect didn't take the initiative to mention the matter of his bloodline, he actually ignited Phoenix flames in front of all the outstanding people in the world on his own accord. Him specially coming here, was it just to resolve grievances, or was it to fight it out until the end? Phoenix flame. That's right. That is indeed the Phoenix flame's aura. It's impossible for any other profound fire to imitate. How is Yunche suddenly able to ignite Phoenix flames? Don't you have to have the Phoenix bloodline in order to ignite Phoenix flames? Could it be that Yunche is of the Phoenix bloodline? Yunche can't be a member of Divine Phoenix Sect, or else why would he come out to represent Blue Wind Nation and dare to provoke Divine Phoenix Empire? Could it be that he's of Divine Phoenix Sect's bloodline that leaked out? But Divine Phoenix Sect absolutely wouldn't allow the bloodline of the Phoenix to be leaked out in the slightest. The Phoenix flames Yunche had ignited caught everyone's attention. No one would have ever thought that such an unexpected scene would appear at the beginning of the last match. Forget about the entire audience of spectators, even those from the four great sacred grounds had shocked expressions. Looks like a pretty good program is about to start on stage. Yi Xinghan narrowed his eyes, as though watching a play. Shooting a glance at Ling Kuan, he asked lazily, "Elder Ling, it appears that you don't seem too shocked about this. Because 2 years ago, I already knew that this kid possessed the Phoenix bloodline." Ling Kuan answered. "Oh. My guess was right, it was due to Divine Phoenix Sect's pressure that he came to participate in this 7-nation ranking tournament, to settle this bloodline matter. It's just that the way he intends to settle it is quite intriguing. I am the same as young Hall Master, let's see what's the next item on this program. However, I don't believe that this Yunche kid is simply courting death." Ling Kuan leaned on his seat, also with a posture of watching a play. Feng Feiyan was the nearest to Yunche. He too, totally did not expect that Yunche would actually take the initiative to ignite the Phoenix flame in front of everyone present and expose the fact that he possessed the Phoenix bloodline. Since the situation had already become like this, he naturally didn't bother to remain silent. His brows sunk as he said sternly, "Yunche. My sect was planning to settle the matter about you possessing our Divine Phoenix Sect's bloodline after the ranking tournament, so it wouldn't influence the course of this ranking tournament, but it seems like you can no longer hold yourself back." "Right, I can't hold back any longer." Yunche leaned over to the side, his face cold and grave, without the least bit of fear, "because you Divine Phoenix Sect owes me an explanation." Yunche's words were like thunderclaps echoing on a clear day, shocking the entire audience stupid. The mighty Lord of the 7 Nations, the unshakable Divine Phoenix Sect, owes him an explanation? He, a profound practitioner from Blue Wind, actually wants Divine Phoenix Sect to give him an explanation? Feng Feiyan was stunned, then he didn't know whether he should be angry or laugh. "Divine Phoenix Sect owes you an explanation? Ha 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 ha. In my entire life, I have never heard a joke as funny as this one." Yunche was expressionless as he distinctly enunciated each word. "Half a year ago in Blue Wind Imperial City, my wife Kang Yu and I were celebrating our wedding in the Imperial Palace. On that day, the entire nation was supposed to celebrate with us, and overflow with joyousness. But Yunche's gaze shifted, accurately focusing on 13th Prince Feng Shichen, who was sitting in Divine Phoenix Empire's seating area. Your Divine Phoenix Sect's 13th Prince Feng Shichen actually brought 2 people along, unsolicited. Not only did they wreck my great wedding without reason, they even threatened to put me to death on the spot. If not for the fact that this 13th prince was a little weak and was driven away after being beaten severely injured by me, I probably would have died on my wedding day for no reason. I previously had no grievances nor enmity with Divine Phoenix sect, yet you guys wish to take my life just based on the comical word, bloodline. Is this your Divine Phoenix sect's way of doing things? If you guys still want to save some face, shouldn't you be giving me an explanation in front of everyone present? Yunche's righteous words were shocking to the core. He was but one person in Divine Phoenix City, in Divine Phoenix Sect's main headquarters, in front of Divine Phoenix Sect's core members and 3 million profound sky people, yet held no fear as he severely questioned this incomparably enormous number one sect of the profound sky continent. Aside from shock, everyone's reaction toward this was still shock. They never would have imagined that there would be someone, who was even just a young practitioner from Blue Wind Nation that had not reached 20, would publicly question the entire Divine Phoenix set without fear. How bold was this? How courageous, how brave? And Yunche's words had also more or less given the entire audience a basic summary of the grievances between Yunche and Divine Phoenix sect. Clearly, when Divine Phoenix sect knew that Yunche possessed the Phoenix bloodline, they sent Feng Shichen to deliver the ranking tournament invitation letter, and to handle Yunche on the side. Because half a year ago, was exactly the time of when the 6 nations received their invitation letters. Everyone knew that their bloodline was Divine Phoenix sect's biggest taboo, and that was understandable. For any sect, they absolutely wouldn't allow their core techniques to be leaked out, let alone the Phoenix bloodline, soul of the entire Divine Phoenix sect. But it seemed like this 13th Prince Feng Shichen couldn't show off his prowess in front of this hard-headed Yunche, and had instead suffered a huge loss. Feng Shichen's entire face became thoroughly red as everyone's gaze made him feel as though he was sitting on pins and needles. In front of the entire audience, Yunche had actually just spoken out the events of that day. As a Divine Phoenix Prince, not only had he lost his dignity, his face had been completely obliterated. The lie he told Feng Shuming and Feng Hongkong had also no doubt been exposed. He firmly tightened his fists as he suddenly grew dizzy, so depressed that he nearly fainted right away. The expressions on the other princes' faces that gazed upon him were mostly all of gleeful delight for his misfortune. Feng Shuming immediately stood up from his seat as he roared in a stern voice, "Insolence! Our Divine Phoenix sect has always guarded our bloodline for 5,000 years, and has never allowed even a bit of our bloodline to go out, everyone knows this. Yet you are a bastard and mixed breed that our sect accidentally left wandering outside. According my Divine Phoenix sect sectoral rules, you either return to my Divine Phoenix sect and won't allow to leave for eternity, or you'll receive my sect sanctions, death." How dignified was my 13th brother, for him to personally deal with your matter was already giving you a face and chance as great as the sky. If you do not return to Divine Phoenix sect, killing you would more so be right and proper. What face do you have to make a big fuss here? Ha 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 ha. Yunche uttered a hearty laugh, and asked in reply, "Right and proper? Bullshit. Yunche, was born in Blue Wind Nation, grown up in Blue Wind Nation. Never have I used any resource of your Divine Phoenix sect, nor have I ever received the slightest bit of grace from your Divine Phoenix sect. I've never even drank a single mouthful of water from your Divine Phoenix sect. Yet you start talking about whether I return and submit, or die. You actually still have the face to say right and proper? On what basis? On the basis that you have our Divine Phoenix sect's bloodline. On the basis that you are a bastard who seeped out from my Divine Phoenix sect. Feng Shiming said in a stern voice. What a joke. Yunche coldly laughed with disdain. Then, just on what basis do you think that the Phoenix bloodline in me comes from your Divine Phoenix sect? Does that even need to be proven? Feng Shiming also returned with a cold laugh. My sect's Phoenix bloodline comes from the grace of the Phoenix god, and was thereby able to proliferate, forming into the Divine Phoenix sect today. In the entire profound sky continent, only our Divine Phoenix Empire possesses the Phoenix bloodline. Is that so? Yunche slowly spoke. Then how do you know that my Phoenix bloodline doesn't come from another legacy of the Phoenix god? The Phoenix divine beast had long ago disappeared in the ancient eras. The Phoenix god, spoken by you lot, is a tiny soul entity dispersed by the Phoenix divine beast for the purpose of leaving behind its bloodline. Scattered in various corners of the world, even in the same continent, there is a chance for multiple to appear, not simply one alone. You lot can obtain the heritage, on what basis do you think others can't? The moment these words of Yunche's were uttered, the expressions of Divine Phoenix Sect's people all simultaneously changed. Feng Fei Yan's face abruptly darkened, as he roared lowly, "Insolent youngster! To actually dare defile my sect's Phoenix God! You think I won't kill you here and now? Ha, fighting a battle of tongues with you lot really is wasting my energy." Yunche uttered a sneer. With the howling sound of wind before him, Dragonbolt was swung up, pointing at Fen Shalor, as phoenix flames explosively burned on the sword's body. "Didn't you say that I, Yunche, am a bastard leaked out of your Divine Phoenix sect? All right, then I'd like to see whether or not there is anyone of a similar age as me that can fell me here. If the young generation of your Divine Phoenix sect who possess the Orthodox bloodline doesn't even have anyone who can defeat me, then wouldn't that prove that you guys are the true bastards? How truly preposterous! If not under the gazes of everyone, with the sacred grounds on the side as it was also the 7-nation ranking tournament's arena, Feng Fei Yan really wished he could just disregard his status as Great Elder, and personally go up and take Yunche's life with a slap. With Divine Phoenix Sect's power and influence that imposed their might over the world, before them, just who did not tremble with fear and act respectfully? No one had ever dared to challenge Divine Phoenix Sect's dignity like so. He pointed at Yunche, and said with an overcast expression, "Well, very well. As a bastard whose body flows with the blood of our phoenix, you actually still dares to be so unbridled and arrogant. Very well. 14th Prince, no need to hold back. Let this bastard understand what the pure and genuine phoenix bloodline is." "Great Elder, be at ease," Feng Shalor insipidly replied. His eyes narrowed and looked straight at Yunche as he said with a low voice, "Aha, I originally only wanted you to immediately roll off the Phoenix stage. But now, I've changed my mind. If I accidentally slipped and crippled your limbs and bloodline later, don't blame me, okay? I'm just afraid that the one crippled will be you," Yunche said in a cold voice. "Still being insolent when death is upon your neck, truly laughable yet pitiful." Feng Shalor raised his arms as the palms of his hands simultaneously burned up with phoenix flames. Just as he was about to step forward, a profound energy sound transmission from Feng Hongkong suddenly traveled to his ears. "Do not underestimate the enemy. Attack with all your strength, kill him right away." Feng Shalor froze for a bit, then his hand posture suddenly changed, as a scarlet-colored lightning hissed through between his hands, then transforming into a approximately 8 feet long lance that was entirely scarlet red like hot iron. "It's the Emperor Profound Weapon. Divine Phoenix Lance. 14th Prince actually utilized Divine Phoenix Lance from the start. Seems like His Highness is completely enraged. I reckon it's to make Yunche lose miserably with the quickest speed, making him unable to speak up again. Once Divine Phoenix Lance is out of the bag. Guess how many moves does His Highness need to defeat him?" A Divine Phoenix disciple said leisurely. 7 moves. Another Phoenix disciple casually answered. 7 moves? You really are thinking too highly of that blue-wind brat. The Phoenix disciple in front of him curled his lips to a great extent, then sneered, "At most 5 moves, that brat would be burnt to the point that his biological father wouldn't recognize him. An Emperor Profound Sword, an Emperor Profound Lance, just the mere aura of the 2 Emperor Profound weapons distorted the air above the Phoenix stage." Feng Shalor shifted his eyes, glancing at Yunche's Dragonbolt as his brows slightly raised. The Divine Phoenix Lance in his hands had more than 3,000 years of history, experienced numerous battles and refining, and had long ago developed a consciousness. Only the strongest practitioner of Divine Phoenix Sect's young generation was worthy of possessing it. Once the Divine Phoenix Lance came out, numerous other lances would tremble. But at this moment on the Phoenix stage, Dragonbolt's aura was actually mutually contending against it, with both sharing the limelight. The Divine Phoenix Lance that he was immensely proud of was actually unable to suppress a blue-wind practitioner's Emperor Profound heavy sword. But very quickly, his attention shifted away from Dragonbolt. Forget about the Emperor Profound sword in his hands. Even if it was a Tyrant Profound sword, he would still not care. He used one hand to casually support the lance as his other hand stretched out toward Yunche. With an entire body full of openings while not concealing the contempt he had for Yunche, he said, "Make your move. It is beneath my dignity to make the first move against a bastard who overestimated his abilities." "Really? I just happen to feel the opposite." Yunche laughed coldly as he stepped forward. Phoenix flames violently ignited on his entire body, rapidly spreading toward Dragon Fault. A shocking aura suddenly burst forth like a volcanic eruption as he directly struck forward toward Feng Shalor. Relying on the sky-profound universal pellet to forcefully promote his strength, Yunche's currently overall strength had long surpassed the level he was at before, back when he was fighting Feng Chihua. And with every increase in profound strength, his overall strength was amplified by several folds if compared to an ordinary profound practitioner. Hence, even though he was faced with such a contrast in level, the Feng Shalor who surpassed Feng Chihua, he was still not afraid. Imposing aura is not bad. However, that's not of any use. Facing Yunche's blazing heavy sword attack filled with an astonishing imposing aura, Feng Shalor still wore an indifferent smile. With a leisurely posture, his right hand that grasped onto the divine phoenix lance was still horizontal, without any indication of him attacking with his lance. Only his left hand slowly extended, casually releasing out a phoenix fire beam that was as sharp as lightning. Reap! The phoenix flame above Dragon Fault collided with Feng Shalor's fire beam in the sky, creating an ephemeral ear-piercing tearing sound. The two flame radiances immediately conjured wisps of smoke. The phoenix flame on top of Dragon Fault was torn apart as though it were paper, instantly becoming two halves. The faces of Divine Phoenix Empire's profound practitioners and Phoenix disciples all revealed sneers as they jeered at how much Yunche had overestimated himself. Ling Jie and Hua Minghai's heart immediately rose to their throats. The imposing aura of Yunche's strike was incomparably large, but Feng Shalor was a terrifying level 8 throne. In front of Feng Shalor's absolutely overwhelming strength, his unreasonable strength could be said to not be threatening at all. Saying that it was unable to withstand a single blow was not too excessive. "Heh, trash is trash." Feng Shalor's face was filled with contempt, but just as he revealed his sneer, it immediately froze on his face. He had indeed easily torn apart the phoenix flame, but after the flame, a force as great as a mountain suddenly came battering over. This force was unreasonably tyrannical and had even caused him to stop breathing for a short while. The phoenix flame Yunche had released was just ordinary phoenix fire that did not use the world ode of the phoenix. Possessing both the phoenix bloodline and world ode of the phoenix, if Feng Shalor wished to control ordinary phoenix fire, it was naturally as easy as pie. However, he was absolutely unable to tear apart the peerless berserking strength of the heavy sword. Feng Shalor startled, and the phoenix flame in his hands immediately burst out with full power. However, the oppressiveness of Yunche's heavy sword far exceeded his expectations. His arm sunk down as his entire body was pushed back. His gaze sharpened. As he swung his right arm, the originally motionless divine phoenix lance released an angry aura that soared to the skies. Like a huge ferocious flame beast, it heavily smashed toward Dragon Fault. Boom! Divine Phoenix Lance and Dragon Fault fiercely collided as countless Phoenix fire beam diverged outwards, scattering to become scarlet-colored flame serpents that filled the sky. An enormous current of energy exploded between the two people, exactly like that of a small-scale volcanic eruption. Feng Shalor's gaze darkened, then, with an explosive force, the Phoenix flame on top of the Divine Phoenix Lance immediately rose by several fold, directly knocking Yunche up in the air. Bang! Yunche spun in midair, and steadily landed over 60 meters away. Beneath the recoil, Feng Shalor was also heavily forced back a step. Although it was merely a step back, to him, it was already the highest humiliation. Ling Jie and Hua Minghai now let out a long breath of relief. Even though one was knocked in the air and one, who hurriedly attacked with a lance, had taken a step back, the difference between Yunche and Feng Shalor was still far too distant. However, neither of them had suffered a grave defeat, and making Divine Phoenix Sect's #1 genius take a step back was still considered to be consoling. Not bad at all. Feng Shalor levered the lance and slowly nodded, his face with the expression of a strong practitioner praising a weaker one. "I never expected this. You're actually a tiny bit stronger than what I had imagined. Even though it's mainly because I only used 30% of my strength, you still were able to force me to swing my divine phoenix lance once, worthy of praise. Yunche only kept a calm face, not even bothering to smile. Very well, since I've already used the divine phoenix lance, then I'll let you properly have a taste of the divine phoenix lance's power. Though both are Emperor profound weapons, weapons are still dead. How large of a power they could display still depends on its owner. Hold on to your Emperor sword tight, let me play for a while longer, don't drop it after only 2 or 3 moves. Feng Shalor held the divine phoenix lance horizontal to his chest with the faint smile of an inquisitor, as the invisible imposing aura that came from the divine phoenix lance slightly distorted the surrounding atmosphere. The corners of Yunche's mouth twitched, forming a faint smile. Feng Shalor was a genius, there was no need for any doubt, and he was also the top genius of Divine Phoenix sect, the #1 sect. However, the word genius often coexisted together with the word arrogance. This was true in no matter which plane. Especially when they were met with praise and other people's admiration throughout one's life. As for those who never had a rival within their peers, even if they appeared humble on the surface, they had long since made it a habit to never put anyone in their eyes. This also included Yunche. However, what was different about Yunche was that although he was arrogant, he would never deliberately underestimate an opponent. Then, let the games begin, you'd better receive them well. Feng Shalor swung the divine phoenix lance and the phoenix flames on its entire body immediately combusted as a scorching heat wave surged in every direction. Wrapped in phoenix flame, the divine phoenix lance trembled unceasingly while uttering a phoenix cry at the same time, as though it was alive. Crack! The phoenix stage below Feng Shalor's feet suddenly ruptured. This time, Feng Shalor moved first. With a raise of his long lance, a tsunami-like flaming tornado charged toward Yunche. The shattered stones below were lifted up by the tornado, turned into fine powder midair. His Highness seems to be a little bit serious now. Looks like he's not really in a good mood because he was forced to use the divine phoenix lance earlier. A phoenix disciple commented. TCH. His Highness was just too careless, that's all. If he added a little more force back then, how could that Yunche brat possibly make His Highness use the divine phoenix lance? But it looks like His Highness being in a somewhat bad mood is right. This Yunche brat, he's finished. I can't even imagine how tragic he'll be. The entire atmosphere above the Phoenix stage was completely thrown in disorder as a terrifying aura that clearly expanded the air itself became visible to the naked eye. In front of this remarkably strong attack, Yunche's expression turned grim. Opening, burning heart, he ignited a surging Phoenix flame, then fearlessly met it head-on. The berserk profound energy poured into Dragon Fault as a falling moon-sinking star ruthlessly smashed onto the flaming tornado. His causing death. Seeing that Yunche did not block or retreat and was instead actively confronting the attack, 3 words simultaneously appeared in every Divine Phoenix profound practitioner's heart. Boom! 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 As a chain of profound energy explosions crazily echoed, the splattering Phoenix flame was like a shower brought along by a storm as it madly danced about. The Phoenix stage below the two suddenly split apart, as fine cracks quickly spread out, resembling spiderwebs. The longest crack spread directly to the edge of the Phoenix stage. The Phoenix stage was a place where Divine Phoenix sect held internal competitions, so it was naturally incredibly firm. It wasn't constructed of ordinary stone, but rather, the toughest of jade stone. In the previous 6 nation battles, even though the matches were intense, the Phoenix stage's pavement was not damaged in the slightest. But now, a large expanse of the Phoenix stage had ruptured due to the collision of the two weapons. What? What kind of a power is this? Not one of the 5 nations participating practitioners were not trembling with fear. They had personally experienced how hard this Phoenix stage was. Even when they used all their strength to smash upon it, they couldn't even make a little hole. How terrifying was this power that had actually split apart the Phoenix stage? Boom! After the last echo of explosion, the two parted in the midst of scattering flame and broken stone. Then, they landed on separate edges of the Phoenix stage. Feng Shalor landed steadily, and Yunche also landed steadily. What? Everyone was shocked still, all of the eyes of Divine Phoenix Empire's citizens convexed, not daring to believe their own eyes. Everyone clearly saw how terrifying Feng Shalor's lance strike was, for even the incomparably hard Phoenix stage had been split apart. But Yun Che had actually blocked it, and had even completely blocked it. With 5,000 years of history and the world ode of the Phoenix as its core and foundation, numerous profound techniques had been created by Divine Phoenix sect. What Feng Shalor cultivated was the extremely powerful, absolute flame Divine Phoenix lance. The move used previously was Absolute Flame Divine Phoenix Lance's powerful, glorious Phoenix Dance. When he had been forced to use the Divine Phoenix Lance due to Yun Che's attack, he was secretly resentful, so he decided to directly defeat Yun Che with a glorious Phoenix Dance. Never did he expect that it could actually be completely blocked by Yun Che. Not only was the Yun Che in front of him standing stably, his expression was calm, without any indication that he had been harmed. Even his aura didn't have the slightest bit of turbulence. And at this moment, his figure suddenly blurred, appearing behind Feng Shalor so fast that he didn't even have time to breathe. With a swing of his sword toward his waist, a surging profound energy storm assaulted Feng Shalor, lifting the entirety of the phoenix robe he wore. Phoenix sweeping the heavens. Feng Shalor's complexion darkened as the Divine Phoenix Lance was thrown out, screaming alongside a scorching heat wave. Bang! As the Divine Phoenix Lance fiercely smashed onto Dragon Fault, an intense dragon cry simultaneously sounded with a sharp phoenix cry. Both of the two's phoenix flames were torn into thousands of chaotically fluttering flame tongues, burning the atmosphere with hissing sounds. Boom 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 boom. Flames scattered higher and higher as a large majority of the phoenix stage was submerged inside the tongues of flame which filled the sky. The two people and two emperor weapons were like two enormous cruel sharks that frantically tore within the sea of fire as they clashed wildly. Each collision would cause the phoenix stage to tremble acutely. So intense that even the entire arena faintly quaked. The expressions of Divine Phoenix's profound practitioners changed, the expressions of profound practitioners from the 6 nations also changed. Even the expressions of Divine Phoenix sect's big shots had become heavy. In front of Feng Shalor, who was using the Divine Phoenix Lance, Yun Che was actually still not at a disadvantage. Within the entire audience, almost every person did not dare to believe what their eyes were seeing. Especially the 6 nations' profound practitioners, their souls continuously shuddered acutely. That frightening collision and that strength, terrifying to the point of unfathomable, incessantly burst apart the Phoenix stage. Was this really a battle between two youths? Forget about Feng Shalor, he was, after all, of Divine Phoenix sect's imperial bloodline, and was even known as the #1 genius of Divine Phoenix sect in this generation. But Yun Che came from Blue Wind, and he was even younger than Feng Shalor by 3 years. To actually be strong to such an extent, how exactly did he cultivate? Those profound practitioners of the 5 nations that had exchanged hands with Yun Che previously were stunned on the spot. They were originally resentful because Yun Che had defeated them with a brief sweep, but now, as they stared blankly at Yun Che's power, they realized that Yun Che had completely gone easy on them. If Yun Che felt like killing all of them, it would be as easy as blowing off dust. The heavy sword uses overbearingness as its principle. Even though the lance could not match the heavy sword in overbearingness, it was much more agile than the heavy sword. The sea of fire continued to spread amidst the 2 emperor profound weapons, and had already gradually spread outwards to over 150 meters, as the flames engulfed the 2's figures. From the spectator seats, one could only hear the thunderous collision sounds and the overwhelming tide of flames that ferociously danced non-stop. Ling Jie and Hua Minghai both leaned their upper bodies forward, their eyes stared wider than an ox. Ling Jie had never questioned Yun Che's might, but he absolutely had never dared to think that Yun Che would actually be so much more powerful than when he defeated his grandfather, Ling Qianni, back then. The Yun Che back then was at the 7th level of the Earth Profound Realm, and currently, he was at the 10th level of the Earth Profound Realm. This difference of 3 levels in the Earth Profound Realm was actually like 2 people as different as heaven and earth. Boss Yun was actually this strong. Hua Minghai's voice trembled as he spoke with a dull face. What Yun Che currently faced up against was the #1 of the Divine Phoenix sect's young generation, you know. He had actually fought without being at a disadvantage. As he thought back to the time when he had been knocked down from the sky with one palm after being seen through in his disguise as Yang Xiaohua when attempting to approach Yunche, cold sweat instantly fell from his forehead. If Yunche didn't go easy on him back then, his little life would have long ended to the point where he couldn't die anymore. In the preparation area, the complexions of all 9 genius Phoenix disciples changed. They had previously been fully confident that Yunche could never be their match, and defeating him would be as easy as turning one's hand. But now, they just discovered that they were viewing the sky from the bottom of a well. The arrogant and conceited one was not Yunche, but they themselves. The terrifying strength Yunche displayed could easily suppress any one of them. This guy, a Phoenix disciple, gritted his teeth as he said resentfully. A person born from Blue Wind, who was even younger than them in age, and was even mocked and belittled without any restraint, actually exhibited a strength that made even them feel frightened. This made their face burn with fever, and their heart distressing to the extreme. Indeed, excessively strong. Another Phoenix disciple deeply took a breath in. This kind of combat strength is basically nearing the 8th level of the Emperor Profound. Even though it greatly shocked us, to triumph over 14th Prince is still only wishful thinking. That's right. 14th Prince hasn't used his full strength at all yet. The world ode of the Phoenix was merely used to the 2nd stage at most. I just don't understand, why does he want to fight with that brat with this kind of condition? It ought to be that 14th Prince wanted to see this kid's limit. HMPH, it's almost over 100 exchanges now, this must already be the utmost limit of Yunche's strength. As long as 14th Prince is willing, he can completely suppress Yunche at any time. Phoenix wings breaks mountains. Amidst a wave of fire, Feng Shalua ripped apart the flames, took off into the air, and smashed his lance down. As landslide-esque loud noise resounded, the Phoenix flames atop the Phoenix stage were seemed to be swept up by a hurricane and completely went into a boiling state. A 12-meter-wide huge pit was smashed out from the incomparably tough Phoenix stage. Under the impact from the enormous energy, Yunche was blown far away, landing on the edge of Phoenix stage. Feng Shalua floated in midair, his gaze locking onto Yunche's position, as a trace of sinister curl appeared on the corner of his mouth. Not bad, to have actually endured again. Then, how about this move? Feng Shalua raised his arms up, lifting the divine Phoenix lance high up in the air. In an instant, it was as though the ferociously burning sea of Phoenix flames received some kind of irresistible pull, as they all took off into the air, rushing straight at the skies. Then, they quickly compiled at skies above the divine Phoenix lance's tip. In a blink of the eye, above Feng Shalua, there converged a nearly 60 meters wide, red as blood moon made of flames. WW, what is that? Ling Jie's eyes stared wide, as he shouted with an alarmed voice. The entire arena was also entirely filled with shocked shouts. In every single round of exchange Feng Shalua did with Yunche, he would always sprinkle down large amounts of Phoenix flames. The Phoenix flames continued to burn on the Phoenix stage, not extinguishing for a long time, and finally converged into a sea of flames. But at this time, it was unexpectedly all gathered up by him in an instant. Very clearly, the Phoenix flames he sprinkled out when fighting with Yunche back then, was all preparing for this moment. The moon of flame on the lance tip was bright red and glaring, its imposing might as tumultuous as a tsunami, as fast as a mountain. Even those spectators over a kilometer away felt as though their chests were being pressed down by a heavy stone plate, unable to breathe. It could be imagined just how terrifying of an imposing pressure Yunche, who wasn't even 60 meters away from Feng Shalua, was bearing. It's really a tough job for you to play with me for such a long time. To be very honest, your strength has made me somewhat astonished. Your limit, I have also probed to a good extent. Yet unfortunately, my limit, you do not have the qualification to see. Feng Shalua smiled dully. Even though the mightiness of Yunche's strength wasn't merely making him somewhat astonished at all, it was entirely shocking. But still, he was the #1 prodigy of Divine Phoenix sect, and the strength Yunche displayed as of now, still had no way of defeating him. He said with a relaxed expression, for people of the same age, to be able to play for so long with me you can actually be considered the first. But too bad, it was merely in deliberation by me. I was merely deliberately taking time laying out Phoenix flames, so that I can give you a most magnificent death. Divine Phoenix Lance Final Style, Moon of the Phoenix. Feng Shalor's black hair fluttered, his phoenix attire flapped in the wind, as the Divine Phoenix Lance swung down in midair. Instantly, the enormous moon of flame in the air rumbled, then, like a meteor on the horizon, it abruptly plummeted down toward Yunche. Everywhere the moon of the Phoenix arrived at, the space would be severely deformed from compression. The Phoenix stage below actually distinctively caved in under the incomparably enormous power. Feeling the enormous energy this moon of the Phoenix carried, Yunche's expressions became extremely solemn. His steps quickly drew back. After a few steps, his back leg all of a sudden stepped onto the edge of the Phoenix stage. The Phoenix stage restricted the two's area of battle. Falling off from the Phoenix stage meant losing this battle. If it was an ordinary battle, he still could choose to dodge with all his strength with the help of Star God's broken shadow. Yet for him who couldn't fly, who was forced to a dead end, other than stepping down from the Phoenix stage, there was no chance to dodging at all. SSS. Moon of the Phoenix enlarged in the reflections on his pupils and gradually filled his entire field of vision. Under the powerful energy surges, Yunche's ears were entirely engulfed by the extremely violent energy's rumbling sounds, and couldn't hear anything else at all. The flame scorching could not affect him in the slightest, but the chaotic profound energy within was destroying Yunche's clothing piece by piece. Yunche's brows slowly sunk down. Just as Moon of the Phoenix was less than 30 meters away from him, a fierce glint suddenly flashed through his eyes. Ha! With a loud roar, Yunche raised his heavy sword across. Both of his arms swelled, as his blood vessels could distinctly seen popping up on his skin, swollen to the point that they might burst at any time. His entire body's profound energy was channeled to its limit, pouring into his arms without any reservation. Behind him, a streak of the Sky Wolf's dark blue image roared in fury. Sky Wolf slash! Yunche vaulted up and initiatively met toward the Moon of the Phoenix. The heavy sword dragon fault, injected with the Sky Wolf's strength, ferociously smashed onto the Moon of the Phoenix. The azure-colored Sky Wolf image, as though a sharp sword that could break through every obstacle, violently pierced into the flame moon. Boom! Moon of the Phoenix exploded with a loud bang, bursting out an overflowing wave of flame that covered the sky and the sun, even submerging the entire Phoenix stage, which naturally engulfed Yunche within. However, this wasn't actually where the true power of this Moon of the Phoenix move laid. The flames that burst apart did not disperse just like that, and instead turned into one after another malevolent lances of flame. In the blink of an eye, the entire sky above the Phoenix stage was entirely filled with lances of flame. Thousands upon thousands of them, under the control of Feng Shalor's power, all shot toward Yunche's location. It was as though a lance shower that reeked of blood had descended. Die? Feng Shalor laughed wildly in a loud voice. He was convinced that just the explosion from the Moon of the Phoenix was already enough to leave Yunche barely alive, as well as destroy all of his profound energy defense. And the following lances of flame would bore countless see-through holes on his body, violently killing him on the spot. Originally, he didn't plan to kill Yunche. After all, this was the arena of 7-nation ranking tournament, and he was in the front of the 7 nations and sacred grounds. Killing one's opponent was likely to invite denunciation, and there even would be unnecessary trouble. But killing Yunche was the order that Feng Hongkong personally sound transmitted to him, so naturally he would act to kill without any qualms. Boss. Ling Jie's pupils constricted in fear, his legs trembled non-stop. Looking on helplessly as Yunche was engulfed by the burst flame moon, then being pierced right after by countless terrifying lance beams. Under this kind of frightening attack, even 10 lives would entirely wither away. This is really too scary. Yunche ought to have thoroughly died, right? You don't say. If he still isn't dead even from this, I'll walk backwards from now on. Sigh, a waste of a peerless genius outside of Divine Phoenix Empire, but he just had to. This isn't something that can't be helped either. How could it be helped that he possessed the Phoenix bloodline? Unless he chose to surrender and pay allegiance, he would never escape the fate of opposing Divine Phoenix sect. With the unyielding temperament Yunche displayed, he obviously won't choose the former in any condition. That's also understandable. Such a peerless prodigy who reached this point relying on just himself, how could he be willing to suddenly be controlled by a large sect? Divine Phoenix Empire actually had such a terrifying move. It really is too scary. Feng Shalor's body slowly descended from the sky, his face carrying a complacent smile. The reason why he used Moon of the Phoenix was precisely to create such a magnificent yet stunning effect in order to cover up the awkward situation he made before from wrongly estimating Yun Che's strength. However, just as the tip of his foot was about to touch the Phoenix stage, his pupils abruptly constricted, as the smile on his face also instantaneously went stiff. The firelight exploded out by the Moon of the Phoenix and the overwhelming lances of flame began to quickly dissipate. From within the phoenix flames that was gradually becoming thin, he saw a figure that just stood there. In the next moment, the phoenix flames broke apart, revealing Yun Che's grave and stern face. What? What? Feng Shalor's expression greatly changed for the first time. Beside his ears, shocked cries from all directions resounded as well. The flames continued to extinguish, gradually revealing Yun Che's intact figure. Grasping dragon bolt in his hands, he quietly stood there, letting the surrounding flames freely scorch him. The clothing on his body was damaged in many places, his hair was also somewhat messy. However, the expression in his eyes was not in the least turbid. Under the tattered clothes, the exposed skin was flawless, intact in every chunk. Only the location on his chest had 3 more bloody holes that weren't very deep. The berserking energy of Moon of the Phoenix were basically all pure phoenix flames, and would at most deal impacts to him, without being able to harm him in the slightest. But the phoenix lance mirages that came right after forced him to activate Sealing Cloud Locking Sun, with no other choice. After taking over thousands of times of bombardment, Sealing Cloud Locking Sun was finally broken, as 3 streams of phoenix lance mirages crashed onto his chest. But with his true dragon's body, this kind of concentrated attack from dispersed energy could merely pierce out 3 vague bloody holes on his body. When Yun Che fought with his life on the line against Feng Shalor, 1/3 of the blood vessels and bones in his body broke, and even then, he completely recovered in less than 10 days of time. This little injury, however, that didn't even touch the bone, simply couldn't even be considered much of an injury to him. Episode 71 is end here. Next episode coming tomorrow. Thanks for watching.